Welcome to Craving the Heat, where desire takes the lead and every story leaves you wanting more. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments and keep up with our latest naughty stories. Claire had been married to Daniel for 7 years. Their life, from the outside, looked steady, predictable in the way long-term relationships often became. They had routines, coffee in the morning, quick kisses goodbye, dinners at home, and occasional movie nights on the couch. Nothing was particularly wrong, but nothing sparkled either. She loved Daniel. But slowly, that love had begun to feel like something she carried, not something she lived on. It was a rainy Wednesday morning when Daniel kissed her on the forehead, grabbed his briefcase, and said, "I'll be home late. Big meeting today." She nodded, smiled, and waved as he left, and then she sat at the kitchen table, her coffee cooling beside her, staring at her phone. There was a message from someone who should have remained a friend. Someone who made her feel seen in ways Daniel hadn't in years. "Are you still thinking about yesterday?" It had started innocently. A coworker from a project, a man named Julian. Funny, warm, intuitive. They shared lunch breaks, swapped playlists, exchanged books. He remembered the little things. Noticed when she changed her perfume. Noticed when she seemed tired. And one day, without warning, he had said it. "You don't look happy." Not really. That was all it took. From that moment, Claire's world tilted. She hadn't realized how lonely she'd become, not until someone else noticed. That Wednesday, she made the choice. She got in her car. She met him at a quiet cafe across town. No one would see. No one would know. They didn't kiss. They didn't touch, but the look between them said more than either of them could. He reached across the table, brushed her hand. "You don't have to stay stuck," he said gently, but it wasn't that simple because Daniel wasn't cruel. He was kind, reliable, the man who held her when her mother passed, the man who built her bookshelves and remembered her birthday every year without fail. She went home early that day, sat on the bed staring at the wall. The guilt crushed her chest. Nothing had happened, not really, but everything almost had. And that was enough to shake her. When Daniel came home, exhausted, briefcase in hand, she stood in the hallway. "I need to talk to you." She said and she told him. Not every detail, but enough about the loneliness, the emotional distance. The man who made her feel something she hadn't felt in years. About how close she came to losing herself. Daniel sat down, quiet. He didn't yell. He didn't walk out. Instead, he cried. And that broke her more than anything else. "I thought we were okay," he whispered. "I didn't know you felt so far away." They spent hours talking that night, for the first time in years, really. Talking, raw, honest, no pretending. No glossing over the pain. It didn't fix everything. Trust had cracked. And healing would take time. But that night, they chose to start again. Together. Claire deleted the number. Not because she wasn't tempted, but because she was choosing love over escape, growth over guilt. Over the months that followed, they went to counseling, rebuilt habits, started dating each other again. They found the laughter they'd lost. The spark returned, not in grand gestures, but in small, consistent moments, cooking dinner together, holding hands during walks, listening without judgment. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And Claire, every time she looked at Daniel across the table, felt something deeper than before. Not the easy love of their early days, but a hard-earned, resilient kind of love, one that had been tested. And still remained. The days that followed weren't easy. There were silences. Not the comfortable kind that once filled Sunday mornings, but the heavy, uncertain kind that held more questions than answers. Claire could feel the weight of her confession still sitting between them, like a third presence in the house. And yet, Daniel stayed. He didn't withdraw. He didn't punish her with distance. Instead, he tried to understand. They went on walks again. At first, it was awkward, hands swinging beside one another, not touching. But slowly the air began to clear like fog lifting from a shoreline. They talked more. About how they lost each other without realizing. About how a routine had become a wall between them instead of a comfort. One night, Claire found him in the living room, going through old photo albums. Pictures from their honeymoon, birthdays, lazy days at home. She sat beside him, and he didn't move away. He simply turned the page and said, "I miss us." She did 2 dots, and so they began again. They didn't try to recreate the past. That would have been impossible. Instead, they built something new. Claire started showing Daniel her art again, something she hadn't done in years. He'd sit beside her, watching her draw, asking questions, genuinely curious. He started bringing her coffee in bed again. Not because he had to, but because he remembered that she used to smile. Brightest in the morning dot, there were still moments when Claire's mind wandered. Brief flashes of Julian's voice, his touch, his offer of something simpler. But they passed. Not because they weren't tempting, but because they weren't real. What she had with Daniel, what they were rebuilding, was raw and sometimes uncomfortable, but it was true. It wasn't about escape. It was about choosing to stay and grow. Months turned into a year. The night of their 8th anniversary, they didn't go out. Instead, Daniel cooked her favorite meal, and they ate by candlelight at home. The house was quiet, warm, filled with the scent of rosemary and garlic. When they danced afterward, it wasn't to impress or to spark something new. It was slow, familiar, like a memory they had both held on to quietly, waiting to return to it dot as they moved in rhythm. She laid her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "I'm sorry," she whispered. He kissed her forehead. "I know." There was no bitterness, only softness, forgiveness, and something stronger than desire. The kind of love that survives being tested and comes back wiser, deeper. They spent the rest of the evening together without distractions. No phones, no television. Just laughter, warmth, and long conversations into the night. They made love slowly, deliberately, not out of need, but out of a deep connection they'd reclaimed. Their bodies moved together like they were remembering something sacred, something never truly lost. And in that moment, Claire felt safe, seen, chosen again. Later, curled into his side beneath the sheets, she looked up at him and smiled. "Do you still love me?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he ran a hand through her hair and held her tighter, more now than ever. And she believed him, not because it was perfect, but because it was real. Because they had fought their way back from the edge. And because passion, when rooted in forgiveness and understanding, burns more deeply than any fleeting desire. They had rebuilt something unshakable. Not a second chance at the same love, but a completely new one. And this time they wouldn't let it slip away. The trees outside their bedroom window bloomed with white flowers, and soft sunlight filtered into the room each morning. It was subtle, but everything felt lighter. Not just the weather, but the way they looked at each other, moved around one another, spoke. Daniel had started waking up before Claire again, just like he used to in the early days of their marriage. He'd make her coffee, always with the perfect amount of milk, and leave it on her nightstand with a small note. Sometimes it was something simple. "You looked peaceful this morning." Other times it was playful. "There's no one I'd rather binge documentaries with tonight." Claire kept every note in a drawer in her studio. She didn't tell him that. It was their own quiet ritual. Their connection wasn't just repaired. It was rewritten. They took dance classes once a week, something Daniel had never been interested in before. At first, he was clumsy and apologetic, stepping on her toes more often than not. But Claire loved it, not the dancing itself, but how he tried, how he showed up. That meant more than any bouquet of flowers or anniversary gift ever had. One night after class, they walked home hand in hand under a sky full of stars. They didn't speak for several minutes, letting the cool air and city sounds fill the silence. Claire looked up at him. "You know, I don't think I believed we could come back from what happened." Daniel nodded. "Neither did I." She stopped, walking, pulling him gently to a stop. but I'm so glad we did. He leaned in and kissed her, soft and slow, right there on the sidewalk. It wasn't rushed or public for show. It was full, certain. The kind of kiss that says, I know who you are now, and I choose you anyway. Back home, they curled up on the couch under a blanket, her legs across his lap, her head resting against his shoulder. He ran his fingers through her hair absently, and she traced circles on his hand. There was still vulnerability between them, moments where old pain would surface, but it wasn't destructive anymore. It was a thread they now knew how to untangle together. Sometimes Claire still thought about Julian, not because she missed him, but because he had been the mirror that showed her what was missing in herself. What she had needed wasn't someone new. It was to feel awake again, alive. And Daniel had met her in that realization, not with blame, but with courage. One evening in early summer, Daniel surprised her with a weekend away. A cabin tucked in the woods by a quiet lake. No service, no distractions, just the two of them. They spent the days reading, cooking together, walking barefoot through the tall grass. On the second night, they sat outside watching the sun sink low across the water. Claire leaned into him, her head on his chest, listening to the lull of the wind through the trees. I've never felt closer to you, she said quietly. He kissed her hair. That's because we're choosing each other now, every day. Later, that night, they made love with a kind of slow intensity neither of them had felt in years, not rushed or performative, but deliberate and deeply connected. Every touch was a conversation. Every kiss was an answer. It wasn't about proving something, it was about presence, about knowing the full weight of the person in your arms and still wanting them completely. Afterward, they stayed tangled. In the sheets, skin against skin, the world outside their little cabin falling away. Claire whispered into the stillness, We're different now. Daniel smiled. Better. And in that moment, she knew it was true. Because love isn't about never breaking. It's about who you become after the fall, and who's still beside you when you choose to stand back up. They spent more time together, not because they had to, but because they genuinely wanted to. Saturday mornings became sacred, coffee on the porch, wrapped in blankets, watching the world wake up. It was during these moments that they often shared their dreams, their fears, and the quiet thoughts they used to keep to themselves. Claire's art blossomed again. She had begun a new series, one she hadn't shared with anyone yet. It was deeply personal, moments from their journey, a shadowed figure stepping into light, two hands reaching for one another across a void, a heart held gently, repaired with golden seams. When she finally showed Daniel, he stood in front of the pieces for a long time, eyes misty. This is us, he said. She nodded. Every part. Their love was no longer naive or untouched by hardship. It was something better, rooted, layered, fully seen. And it made the passion between them burn even deeper. When they touched, it was with the knowledge of all they had almost lost. When they kissed, it wasn't just attraction. It was gratitude, longing, and the joy of being found again. One evening, they hosted a dinner with close friends. Laughter filled the house, candles flickered, and music played softly in the background. Everyone commented on how happy they seemed, how at ease they were with each other. Daniel just smiled, squeezing Claire's hand under the table. Later that night, after the guests left and the house was quiet again, Daniel pulled her close in the kitchen, arms wrapping around her waist. Come with me, he whispered, and led her to their bedroom. There was no rush. They undressed each other slowly, with familiarity and reverence. Every touch was intentional, every kiss filled with years of memories, struggles, and triumphs. They lay wrapped in each other, skin to skin, hearts beating in rhythm. And when they came together, it was soft, full of sighs and deep eye contact, nothing performative, just love made real in the most human way. Afterward, they stayed curled together under the covers, a quiet peace settling between them. I never imagined we could find our way back, Claire said, fingers tracing circles on his chest. We didn't find our way back, Daniel replied gently. We built something new, stronger. She smiled, eyes wet with emotion. Do you think we'll ever drift again? We might, he said honestly. But the difference is, now we'll fight our way back. Together. They fell asleep that night, tangled in warmth, the kind of sleep that only comes when you're truly at peace. And as the wind whispered through the autumn leaves outside, inside their home, love, tested, healed, and stronger than ever, finally settled in for good. Because in the end, it wasn't one night, one mistake, or one apology that defined them. It was the choice to stay, to grow, to love fully and fiercely every single day.